to the second episode of FilmStop. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who heard the first episode and is here sticking with me for the second episode. We're just getting started, so hopefully things will get more exciting. No, you know what? Things will definitely get more exciting as we keep moving on. But I promised you that I will talk a little bit about myself and what the vision of the show is, and here I am, trying to fulfill that promise. But let me start by saying that I am new to podcasts. I have been listening to podcasts for years, as I'm sure many of you have. But this is my first attempt at recording something of my own. And as we go along, I'm sure I will figure things out as well as fix things. I'm sure I'm making a ton of mistakes right now, but that is just the process of learning, and I sincerely hope you guys stick with me. So my name is Suraj Prakash, and as I mentioned yesterday, I am a product manager and I live and work in Chicago. And I have been closely sort of not involved but around movies for the entirety of my life. I grew up on film sets. My parents are in the film industry, albeit in India. And as I was growing up, it was pretty clear to me that films were then and will forever play a very important role in my life. Through many various circumstances, I, as many Indians do, ended up doing engineering, and I'm currently working in Chicago, and I love my job and everything, but there's always something missing, and to me, that's always fulfilled by movies. One of the ways that I sort of go out and seek content and creative relief is just listening to other podcasts and a lot of YouTube channels. My favorite reviewers and content creators from India are Anupama Chopra and Rajiv Masan. I'm sure many of you have already heard their names. If you haven't, do check their content out on YouTube. But I always felt like there's this gap between the professional critics and their content and me, who's not professional in terms of his knowledge or his expertise on cinema, but there is this there's this need for more. There's this need for someone like me to talk to, and so it was a long journey, but now I'm here with this podcast, and the real vision of the podcast for me is to not just talk about cinema and TV, but also build a community and collaborate with like-minded or unlike-minded individuals. Basically, I want to have the ability to talk and discuss any new content that I'm consuming, and it doesn't have to be limited to Indian content or American content or TV or documentary or film or music even. And the goal here is, again, to involve you, the listeners, into building this content with me. So with that, what I want to do is, in the future, as I build a community, I would love to have the listeners join me on these shows and basically have us debate these amazing or dismal movies, TV shows, music, whatever content we're consuming. And I will always try to do reviews on the newer content and always try to give you whatever little news that I know of and share whatever inside stuff that I am coming across with everyone. But what I would really like is to have constant dialogue, and that's why I am hoping to get feedback from you guys and to really understand what I can do to really talk to the content that you want to listen. From time to time, I will also bring in diverse minds that maybe are not as sort of attuned to content that is being created, but want to talk to the zeitgeist, and how certain things in certain content in the zeitgeist is being discussed as a bigger picture, as a part of our society that we live in, and the effect that it has on the society. So before we sort of go into that rabbit hole, I'd like to move on to the next part of this episode, which is basically diving deeper into who I am and giving you sort of a taste of my taste. And what I'm going to do now is sort of go through my top 10 movies. I would like to preface this by saying that my taste, as is with many people, I'm sure many of you listening, evolves and has evolved in many years. And as I'm consuming more content, the more stuff that I'm watching, the more stuff I'm listening to, there is this sort of evolving taste. And also where I am, what sometimes even the mood that I am in or the phase of life that I'm going through also sort of affects the kind of content that I think is my favorite. Some of these things don't change and haven't changed since I was a little kid, and you'll notice that. But there are other things that have come in, and maybe 5 years from now, or even 2 years from now, or maybe 1 year from now, may not, remain in this top 10 list. So this is not set in stone, even though at this point I feel like these are the top 10 movies that I'd like to stand behind. So with that, I'd like to sort of go into my favorite movies, starting with number 10. So at number 10 is a movie that I watched when I was a kid, and since then I have seen at least, I want to say 20 times. And this is a part of a trilogy, but my favorite is, out of the three, which is the Back to the Future trilogy, is the first Back to the Future. Marty McFly and Doc's journey through time and space is just, at the time, was just mind-blowing to me. And the comic elements with the action and the drama, and also the somewhat sci-fi realism with the time paradox at the time was just so new and refreshing that I guess maybe not refreshing because I hadn't really consumed as much like that, but it made my face light up every time I watched it. It made me happier, and so it's in my top 10, all the way at the bottom of the list, but it is still one of my favorites, and I think that one will remain to be my favorites for many years to come. And it's the same with the next one. So number 9 is Dil Chahta Hai. So Dil Chahta Hai is the story of three friends who go through life and the journey of friendship as they evolve and they mature. I saw this movie when I was maybe 12 years old, and I'm sure at the time I didn't have a lot to connect with directly within the movie, but that's the beauty of the movie. The movie has something for everyone at all ages, because I remember watching this with my sister, who was maybe 18 years old or 19 years old, and my parents, and who were in their 40s at the time, but everyone in our family connected with something in the movie. And that's why this movie remains on my list, because as I grow older, this movie sort of has different things, different nuggets for me to sort of enjoy and pick up on. The story of the three friends is still, for me, one of the best friendships told in a movie format. And I love Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara too. But number 9 is Dil Chahta Hai. So the next one is the number 8 movie, is one that when I saw it had themes that were, again, way too mature for me to really grasp, but the theme that I caught onto and I latched onto was one of loneliness. So my number 8 movie is Castaway with Tom Hanks. The fact that a volleyball can become your friend and stick with you through years of not having any real connect with the life out there just something about that hit home for me. It was the first movie I remember being so moved by that I just, I vividly remember watching it the first time and bawling my eyes out because everything in that movie connected with a deeper part of me. And I saw this movie when I was the first time, probably when I was again maybe 12 years old, 13 years old, but I continued to watch it. And it was like one of those movies that would just constantly play on HBO. So it's on the list, and it's, I guess it again, this one has been on my favorites list for years now. The next one is a classic, and I'm sure many of you would have this. And so number 7 on my list is Andaz Apna Apna. Amar Prem and their story and their hilarious journey to meet Ravina and win her is still, one of those comedies in India that will probably remain untouched in its just brilliance. And just brilliance in performance, in direction, hell, even the music. I love the music of the movie. And Thomas Zindagi, that's like, you cannot get over the sheer magic that that movie creates. Every time it comes on TV, every time you choose to play it, I know for me, a lot of memories with Andaz Apna Apna are sort of connected to college and engineering school, and watching it with a bunch of friends and drinking and enjoying the craziness of this movie. Crime Master Gogo and Teja and all of that stuff. It's so insanely quotable, and not to mention that it has what at the time were big stars, but now are some of the biggest superstars, not just in India but in the world, and Amir Khan and Salman Khan, and that sort of magic between the two of them, the chemistry, is just it's amazing. So it makes on my top 10 list at position 7. So we've gone through 4. There's been Back to the Future, there's been Dil Chahta Hai, there's Castaway, there's Andaz Apna Apna. So by now I'm hoping you're noticing a little bit of a pattern here. Movies to me are not limited to where they come from. I think it's more about what they evoke in me, the emotion or the sentiment, or just the memory, nostalgia, this need to sort of constantly go back to the movie and relive those days. That's when I know a movie is a favorite of mine. And so all of the ones that I've mentioned to this point are those kind, but also there's this equal mix of American films and Indian films. So the next one, moving along, my number 5. Wait, is it number 5? 10th was. I'm sorry. I'm gonna do this with you guys listening. So 10th was Back to the Future. 9th was what was 9th? Dil Chahta Hai. 8th was Castaway. 7th was wait, what was 7th? I know I said it. What was 7th? Oh, Andaz Apna Apna. Jeez. Okay, I should have written this down. See, this is something that I'm learning now. But the 6th, not the 5th, the 6th movie on my list is Truman Show. So Truman Show actually comes up because I saw a version of Jim Carrey in this movie that I had never seen before. And when I saw this movie, I was, well versed to his kind of cinema, which was Ace Ventura or Liar Liar or what have you from the time, Cable Guy and all those movies. But when I saw Truman Show, I think to me it was so much more than a Jim Carrey movie. It was this insane dialogue about loneliness in the in even with an entire city with your town with you, the monotonous sort of sense of life, and also the voyeuristic um, cravings that millions across the world have, including myself. But that all of that coupled with this one sentiment that I know I've had, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have had in the past, that is, are people watching me? Like, am I part of some movie or show that is going on, and are the cameras on me? I mean, at least when I was a kid, I had this. Maybe it was a little narcissistic at the time, but I think that all of these things, coupled with great, great score, a very brilliant writing, and just very under what's the right word, underplayed roles. Like they Jim Carrey was so real is too overused. I don't want to say real, because it was more so it was a subdued, it was a calm, it was a very controlled performance, and I love that about him in that movie. And in fact, I think that Eternal Sunshine is one that shows up on my close to top 10 lists, but I became a true Jim Carrey fan then. So moving on to the next one. The next one is my number 5, which at this point, no guesses for, or no words for guessing the fact that it's going to be Hindi, is Luck by Chance. So we talked about a Zoe Akhtar movie in the last episode, which is Gully Boy, and I think that she has matured a great deal as a director. But to me, Luck by Chance is one of those movies that struck a chord, because when I watched it, I had a little more of an understanding of the Indian film industry and films in general, and the journey of Sona, because really the movie is about Sona and not Farhan Akhtar's character, was one that I had seen many times in my life, and especially the world of the strugglers was one that I could sort of somewhere connect with. And I know the movie didn't do great box office, but I think that it was because of its very niche audience. And I think I personally will never forget the opening credit sequence where she shows faces of all these different magicians who work 24/7 behind the scenes to get things going, whether it's the spot boy, making chai, or it's the ironing man ironing the costumes for the scenes, or if it's the spot boy, or sorry, the light guy or the gaffer setting up the lighting for the next scene. She captures that so beautifully, the real world so beautifully, even though there's tones of quirkiness and a little bit of a little bit of finesse on reality in some portions. I think that she has captured the Indian film industry better than I can think of any other filmmaker doing. So that's why it shows up on my top 10 list at number 5. Moving on to number 4. So now we're getting into the top 4 list, and I will say this, that these movies are ones that I go back to over and over and over again, and it's people who know me know that it's nauseating how many times I've watched these movies over and over again. But number 4 is for me Paheli. So Paheli, for those of you who don't know, because I think it's criminally underrated as a movie, was one that was directed by Amol Palekar, and it was starring Shah Rukh Khan, Rani Mukherjee, Juhi Chawla, and Sunil Shetty. It was a movie that came out, I think it was in the later half of 2000s, but the movie is about a ghost. And it's not a secret. It's about a ghost who falls in love with Rani Mukherjee's character, and how basically their love evolves, and how she, knowing that he's a ghost, still falls for him. And this very sweet, melancholic, uh, romantic story of a love story of these two, um, sort of realizing whether or not they can be together for the long term, and then fighting through the challenges that comes. And as I'm talking about it, it sounds so absurd as an idea, but it's based on a short film, I believe, or a short story. I believe the name was Duvida, and someone will correct me somewhere. But the story with the atmospherics, the milieu, the performances, of course, is Amitabh Bachchan, who shows up in a cameo role. Everything is just so great, and there was also the time when Rajkumar Yadav was really funny, but I still think he's funny. I've watched this movie over and over again, and of course, it shows up in my top four. So, uh, yeah. So Paheli is number four. Number three is one that may as well just be my number one sometimes, because I just it's one of those movies again that I watch way too many times, and I have analyzed so many times. Is Inception. So as we move forward with this podcast, you will realize that I am a huge fan, and I feel like fan is a disservice to my sentiments towards Christopher Nolan and his style of filmmaking. But he's a filmmaker that I very strongly admire. I might as well just sort of talk about him right now more about the movie, because the next movie itself, which is, so we're on number three, which is Inception, but number two is Dark Knight, and both these movies have they were movies that when I was watching in the theaters, I remember feeling so strongly that I don't want these to end. I just want to consume more of this world. I want to maybe not live in it, but I just want to know everything about it. It's so fascinating to me. In Inception, we follow a bunch of, I call them dream bandits, trying to incept an idea via a very convoluted dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. I won't say sequence, but process or plan, and it's one that challenges the very core of filmmaking. It makes the audience really stop and disconnect from the characters and think about what the hell is happening. And it's the very opposite of The Dark Knight, because to me The Dark Knight is one where you're so strongly connected with the characters that the story can go in how many ever sort of loops and zones, and it won't matter, because what's happening with Joker and what's happening with Batman and of course Harvey Dent and all these other characters is where your attention's at. Comparatively for me, Inception, and a lot of people that I've talked to about it, is one where they've had to really, in the movie, step aside and be like, okay, wait, what's happening? Let me collate my thoughts and figure out where am I, why is this happening? And I feel like that's why it makes it such a great movie for me, is that I need to watch it over and over again, or need is a wrong word. I want to watch it over and over and over and over again, because every time I'm watching it, I'm course correcting from the last time. And to me, it's the most popcorn version of a thinking man's cinema. I'm doing air quotes for everyone. And to me, it's like, it's one of those movies where I can sit and even talk about it for hours, like I'm kind of doing right now, or even discuss it with other people who either love Inception or hate Inception, because there's it, even though there's a lot of people who admire the movie, I think a lot of people get a little confused as to why it shows up in my top 10, and let alone in my top 3. But I think that it's the same with Dark Knight to me. They're both movies are highly biased by my love for Christopher Nolan, and even though an Interstellar or Dunkirk or Memento they don't show up on these lists, these all these movies are movies that have greatly moved me and have um, strongly sort of challenged me as a member of the audience. So the top one, and I've been mentioning a lot of other names in the middle here. Before I say the top one, I'd like to go through the list real quick again, just so that I can recap my own memory here, and I'll start with the number 10, which was Back to the Future. Number 9 was Dil Chahta Hai. Number 8, sorry. I am an engineer, I promise you. Number 8 was Castaway. Number 7 was Andaz Apna Apna. Number 6 was The Truman Show. Number 5 was Luck by Chance. Number 4 was Paheli. Number 3 was Inception. Number 2, The Dark Knight. And number 1, my all-time favorite, and I don't know if it'll ever get off my list, but it'll for sure, there's a good chance that it can move around in the top 4, but is Swades. It's a second Shah Rukh Khan entry. Oh my god. Right? Second one, right? Yeah, second Shah Rukh Khan entry. Well, I have 2 Amir Khan entries. 2 Shah Rukh Khan entries. And I'm not a huge Shah Rukh Khan fan, but this is one movie that I think that he just knocked it out of the park. And Ashutosh Gavaskar with just I think more than the direction, actually the direction too, I'll tell you why. So the writing of the movie, the narrative is so counter to the Inception narrative, right? I mean, it's a very simple story. It's an NRI who goes back to India and for some selfish wants / he is, I guess, trying to be kind to someone who brought him up when he was a child, but a mother figure to him. But at the same time, there is some selfish sort of dimension to it. He goes back to India and he discovers not just the side of India, but side of himself that he didn't know exists, and falls in love with the country again, and falls in love not for its strengths and its his likings for the country, but more so his the weaknesses of the country, and how he himself can fill that void that he has in his life by giving to his country. And I know it sounds very jingoistic, but I think that you could take Swadesa's story and put it onto any country, any town, family. You could even talk about a family, right? I mean, you could talk about someone who's been estranged from a family and then goes back to maybe take care of his mother, and he or she realizes that what they truly have been missing all their lives is that connection, is that real this void where you feel like you belong and someone needs you as much as you need them. In this case, it was Mohan Bhargav finding his country and his country needing him as much as he needing to connect back with his people. There's no point in me talking about how amazing the music is. There's no point in me talking about how amazing the performances are. But I think the direction, I love the simplistic direction. I think there's this one shot the sequence that I will never forget, is when Shah Rukh Khan goes to collect rent on or lease on the land from a farmer who has nothing to give. And he gives money to the farmer, gives them bottles of water and everything, and then he leaves, and he's sitting in this train, and he sees this kid selling water for $1 or $2. And that sequence with the amazing camera angle by Maheshani, speaks volumes to me. And then that's when the sequence begins, where you're now tracking Mohan's insides, really uh, crushed, as he has realized that, with everything that he has, in comparison to everyone else and relative to everyone else, he has so much, yet he feels this emptiness. Well, look at everyone else around me, and how do they have so little, yet have this want to do more, and fight life and live life, and that just that insides of his just kind of going through this complete turmoil shows on the silver screen. And I think that it's hard for, maybe I'm not explaining it as well as I'm speaking about this, but for those of you who've seen the movie, I think you know what I'm talking about, and it's that, that sentiment that it sort of arises in me, that makes me love it all the more. So yeah, so that's my top 10 list, guys. I know it was a little longer than what I have promised you, but I really hope that it's something that gives you a window into who I am and the kind of content that I like, and hopefully you have enough similarities, or hell, even dissimilarities, and we can actually connect, and you can tell me how I'm wrong, and I can tell you how you're wrong, and we can have a discussion about what we love, and that's movies. So, as always, please continue listening to the podcast, and tell me what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and follow me on Instagram. I'm Suraj, SURAJ1912. On Twitter, I am Suraj S. Prakash. That's SURAJ SPRAKASH. And of course, subscribe wherever you're listening to this. Please do subscribe. So, until next time, guys. Thank you.